Hello and welcome into Discern. Today is Monday, December 13th. I'm Ross and we are joined this week again by Mark Turman, who's filling in for Jim Dennison. Hello, Mark.
Hey, how you doing? Great to be a part of this again today and looking forward to the week.
Thanks. I'm doing well and also looking forward to getting to unpack some more news with you this week. Again, Mark was part of the show last week and he'll be coming in to fill in for Jim occasionally when Jim is out, and great to have his insight and perspective. Today's topic, actually, as a bit of a disclaimer, we're going to be dealing with mental health, and one of our key topics today is dealing with suicide. And so just kind of right up front, we thought it'd be good for the audience to know what topic we'll be covering today. We know different audiences are tuning in, and this is important and a critical topic right now, and it's very much in the news. And so we want to lean into it and make sure we're addressing it. But did want to put that out there right up front. And so I'm going to get into the story. This is from CNN. Last September, Sabine Pollock got a call from the guidance counselor. Her 14-year-old daughter was struggling with depression and had contemplated suicide. After taking her to a crisis center which banned phones used for anyone checking in, Pollock learned from her daughter that the pressures of social media were driving her increased anxiety. As Pollock put it, her daughter feels lost. Like, I have no idea what to do with myself if I'm not on social media. Pollock is among a generation of parents who did not spend their childhoods with social media apps and are now struggling to understand and navigate the potential harms that social media can have on their kids' mental health as they grow up. So, Mark, I think we can get into this from several angles. I think it's important to point out this article does deal with things that are new to parents in this generation. You know, my kids will ask me about the internet. When I was their age, it wasn't there. The concept of a smartphone was science fiction. You know, this is all very new technology.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that we're all trying to come to grips with, not just in our country, but globally. Social media and the technology that drives it. You know, you've heard Dr. Dennison say perhaps that, you know, there's more capable technology within your smartphone that's in your pocket than what took men to the moon back in the 60s. And so what we're experiencing is that we have arrived at capabilities, technologies, and applications such as social media that we haven't had before, and we really don't know how they affect people because we just haven't had them long enough. And we certainly don't know how they affect children and teenagers, and we're grappling with all of that. And now that we've seemingly had things like social media long enough that we're starting to really see some negative outcomes and seeing some negative effects, particularly on things like identity and identity among our children, that is critically important.
Yeah, this quote from the article really stands out from this daughter. Just to read it again, I have no idea what to do with myself if I'm not on social media. So a lot of times I hear about this just about technology in general, but this is even maybe more potent. It's very specific about social media. What about social media is feeding a need or providing this identity that we really should be getting through Christ?
Yeah, and I think identity is this really big topic that we're going to need, especially as the church, to spend a lot more time understanding what that means to all of us, how we see ourselves, how we see other people, and how our identity is formed over time through a lot of different sources. Obviously, that comes through the very first relationships that we have in life with our parents and our family of origin, with our caregivers and our friends. Those are all very important sources that play into our understanding of our identity. But part of the struggle I think that we're experiencing with social media as a new technology and a new opportunity is we thought, or at least I did, that when social media started to be a presence in our life, we kind of assumed that whatever was there was reality. When in fact, what we're learning now is that social media companies created algorithms that really weren't showing us the world in general. They were showing us a particular part of the world based on some of our preferences and some of the things that we were responding to. The algorithms started actually curating things that were coming our way and creating a reality that they thought we would want to see rather than just simply the world as it is. And that's kind of always been some of the problem with all forms of media. There's just no way for them to show us a fully rounded out picture of reality, but we start reacting to that as if it is. And we start forming our opinion of ourselves, sometimes based off of the mirror that's coming to us through social media. And if it's not real, then that means our understanding of self is not going to be based in reality either.
Yeah, how much of it do you think is is it a self-affirming thing? Like, what is it about the social media feeds and the acquisition of likes that moves people into that identity being rooted there?
And I think human beings are made with a need for external affirmation from others. We all need encouragement, and we all need to be built up and strengthened by others. That's the mutual dependency that we've talked about in the past. But we can also become addicted to that, like we get addicted to other things that we need in an unhealthy way, the affirmation and approval of others, rather than finding our acceptance and approval in our relationship with Christ. And that's why it's so important that we're not simply spiritual people. That's a good thing to be, but we are actually finding that spiritual reality through what the Bible teaches us about how God knows us, how God formed us, that He knew us even from before we were born, and that He loved us, and that even though we are all broken by sin, the Bible teaches us that we are still the image bearers of God, and that we all have value, no matter how the world may see us, particularly that virtual world that is not necessarily fully based in reality. That's why I think it's so important that we have an understanding of identity that comes from our faith in Christ and is shaped by what the Bible tells us about God's perspective on us.
Yeah, two tracks come to mind as we think about kind of our application or truths to pull out of this story and in this conversation. The first is about ourselves, specifically an idea that Dr. Dennison had and has shared before of a technology fast. You know, it's definitely something to consider if you find yourself really gaining identity from that, or if you do feel the pulls of that addiction, or maybe you're just aware that you do have it. He's talked about a technology fast.
Yeah, I think what we're learning is that because of our desire for affirmation and encouragement, we can become codependent upon social media as a way of affirming us, and that can become an addiction like very many other things can become an addiction. And we're learning that we need to create limits and boundaries, especially for our children. We need to model it as adults, but I can tell you as the father of now 2 adult children I've lived through this with them, and I wish that I had limited the technology that I used and that they used when they were in their younger years. And what I'm seeing from them now as they become adults is that they're starting to do that because they recognize how unhealthy it can be at times, and that there needs to be a boundary on most things in life, and particularly upon what technology and social media can bring to us.
Yeah, and I'm a parent as well, and one thing I've found along those lines too is that, you know, once you allow access to anything, technology, but also any privilege, just the momentum and the ability to reverse that just gets harder. And so I think that's one just practical thing is, you know, just to be aware of when you start to open those, you know, and of course you have the flexibility as a parent to pull back. I'm just saying it's harder. It
is harder. Yeah. And that's why it's important, you know, if you don't have children or you have young children, that you start now to think very intentionally about this. You know, one of the kind of principles that seems to be very reliable is that as a family, you just don't let technology get taken into private spaces. They always stay in the common spaces of the family, so that everybody can be aware and so that everybody can be careful about how they use technology. And then, like I said, if you've already introduced some technologies, or they've been introduced from other avenues such as school or other parts of their lives, that you have regular and open conversations about what are proper limits, and that you discuss what your family is experiencing through these different media outlets and opportunities. One of the things that we've come to realize, read this a number of years ago in a book by Ted Elmore, that because of the internet, we no longer go to the people who used to interpret life to us. Now, because of the internet, any person with a smartphone or a computer can get just about any information they want on any topic. And they no longer go to their parents, they no longer go to their teachers or their pastors or their youth ministers or their coaches. Those people historically would have been the interpreters of information and help them to process that in a healthy way. Now, because of technology, people of any age, if they have access to the technology, can get to the information, but that doesn't necessarily mean they know how to turn it into wisdom, and they know how to discern, like this ministry is about. They don't know how to discern what is healthy, what is best, and what is good for them sometimes.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I think, and it's super helpful. One last thing I think it's important for us to touch on, and I've seen affirmation of this in the school system in our area. There's absolutely an increased concern of mental health, even in elementary school, definitely into secondary and beyond. And there's an absolute increased concern for suicide. And as we saw in this article, you have a mother who just didn't know. And so I think it's a definite call to action to be engaged with our children. Do you have tips or thoughts on how we can practically do this to try to start to put an end or to curb this, or to plug in with our kids to avoid them feeling this way in secret?
Yeah, and I think some of the things we've already talked about, limiting the time that each family member spends with technology, starting with what the adults model, is a good thing. I think having some guidelines in your home about when, where, and how technology is engaged. Obviously, as parents, using safeguards and being able to monitor everything that is coming into your child's technology is a very wise thing. I think also watching relationships. Oftentimes, if children or young adults are not developing real relationships with people that you can know who your kids' friends are. If all of their engagement with other people seems to be happening through a screen, I think that's a yellow flag or even a red flag to pay attention to, because what we need is not so much virtual interaction and engagement with people. We need real interaction with them. And if your child or your teen is struggling to develop those kinds of relationships, then I think you need to be more attentive. You need to be more conversational with them. You need to help them to navigate what it means to develop not just simply virtual relationships, but more importantly, real relationships with people that you can know and that you can be in the room with. I think that's helpful as well.
Yes, and additional final thought, and I am not a licensed therapist, I am not a doctor, but I have learned a few things along these lines, and two key things I've learned is that when someone's dealing with anxiety or depression, you want to make sure that they see that you see them, and that you are hearing what they're feeling, and that you understand, or at least that you understand that they feel that way, even if you can't directly relate. And oftentimes you can directly relate. So that's the first step. And a second key one is to make sure they know that you're in it with them, that they're not alone in feeling that wherever they're at, you're going to be with them and sit in that and help them through it. Those are just two key things that I've learned and picked up, again, as a parent, and as I've learned what's helpful.
Yeah, and I think those are very valuable. And, I think there's a real important place here for us to affirm the need for doctors and caregivers and trained counselors. Sometimes that's exactly the kind of help that we need. One of the things we can celebrate in this is that some of the stigma around mental health and emotional health is going away, and that we're learning how critically important it is to pursue health in those categories. And in fact, they may be even more important than some of the things we try to do to be physically healthy. that it's absolutely vital, and there is no stigma that should be attached when somebody is struggling with something like depression or anxiety. Those things are very real, and we're becoming much more skillful at helping people in those situations.
Yeah, Mark, I'm glad you mentioned the stigma of professional care and doctors and counselors. Definitely something that Discern can do is just continue to promote those and to help remove that stigma. So this has been a super helpful conversation. I know we'll be back here talking about this again as we just try to navigate and figure out how to love others well, even in the midst of mental health. Mark, thanks so much. We'll see everybody right back here on Discern tomorrow.